In the 90s, Playmates Toys made the deepest line of Star Trek action figures in history. My name's Keith, and I'm a collector working towards owning all 284. I've been a Trek fan for almost 35 years, and most people are sick of me talking about it. But somehow I've convinced my old friend Mike to review them with me on Look at My Star Trek Toys! Hello, everybody, and welcome to Look at My Star Trek Toys, in which me and my old buddy Mike look at my old toys from the 90s. This week we are continuing Voyager Series 1. This is part 2. I'm so excited to talk about the rest of these toys. Last week, you were like, they all look the same. They're all in a Starfleet uniform. Look out, kids. Yes. We're about to meet some new folks. How's it going, Mike?
You know, Keith, remind me if I'm wrong, and if I am, I apologize, audience, for the utter waste of time that you've encountered.
I think wasting time is what they're doing pretty much any time we're listening to us.
You raise a good point. Wasn't Voyager the series, and I want to watch the way I... if you happen to be a subscriber to KME Entertainment and watch any of our other shows, you'll find that often I'm thirsty. So I apologize for what I'm about to say. I'm going to try to say it respectfully. Wasn't there a character on this show, a blonde woman, who was a smoke show?
Yeah, we might discuss that at some point. Yeah, there was a just a bit of a series changeover that happened, and we will discuss it. Although it's not part of Series 1, so because Series 1 came out in the first season of Voyager. So, alas, you might just have to wait. But you do not have to wait for my personal favorite character on Star Trek Voyager. It's hard to rank your children because you love them all equally.
Understood.
But a little bit less equally, my good friend, figure number 6486, the Doctor. Let us beam him in.
Ooh.
This is the Doctor. You ask me, doesn't he have a name? Why is he just a title? Well, he doesn't have a name because this character played by the legendary Robert Picardo is not even a real person. This is the emergency holographic Doctor who, when in the pilot of the show, the caretaker, all of the medical team are killed. And the ship has a little bonus feature in sickbay, and that is a holographic, i.e. computer-generated doctor to be used for emergencies. Well, they're out in the Delta Quadrant, 80 years away. So what do? They make this emergency holographic doctor the permanent doctor. And we find he comes in pretty hard with a personality, and we watch him develop his going from a piece of programming into a full-fleshed person with hopes and dreams and interests.
He goes on a voyage of sentiency, some would say.
He does, and unlike Data, who you can certainly see a parallel there, he is very emotional right from the very start. He is programmed with his creator's personality, so he's pretty cantankerous, he's pretty egotistical, but he is delightfully so.
But how does one... Now, Keith, you've raised all sorts of questions.
All right, let's get into it.
How does one who is holographic by nature perform what I would imagine are, at some point, tactile types of procedures?
Well, this is where we go back to the next generation and we talk about the holodeck, which is using projections of photons and force fields. So we see him by projected photons, but within those, there's a whole complicated set of force fields, which they're able to create force and energy out of energy. So he is able to, just like a holodeck character, interact with actual objects. There you are again. So that means that he can sort of have matter or not. So there's a funny scene where he slaps somebody and somebody slaps him back, and he turns off his matter, and they just just wipe through the image. However, it does come with certain limitations, which means unless there is a holographic projector, he can't go there. Which is why characters on the holodeck can't leave the holodeck. He must have a projector. So only at the beginning of the series, only the medical bay has photonic projectors. Later on, he may or may not, spoiler alert, get a little piece of technology from a more advanced species that allows him to have a mobile emitter that he attaches to his shoulder and can go lots of different places. But there's a ton of great storytelling that happens with this situation because they were able to at some point they're able to communicate back with Earth, sending data back and forth, but they can't beam people, but they can send his program back to Earth before everybody else can get there.
The likeness is pretty uncanny.
It's great. It's a really good figure, and you'll notice if you look at his collar, he has no rank. He has no pips because he is not officially in Starfleet, because he is not, at least at that point when he's created, considered a person. So he can have no rank. So there's no little detail there. Now, in the picture I put of Robert Picardo there, from Tinker, Tenor, Doctor, Spy, fantastic episode, you see he's singing. And the Doctor is an opera buff and sings on the show many times because Robert Picardo is a musical guy too. He was in the original Broadway cast of Gemini, which they converted into a musical that he performed in Philadelphia with my wife.
Whoa.
So he's a very talented singer as well as actor, and the reason that his character is so great is because Bob is so great. He originally, the Doctor was supposed to be just a recurring, not a main cast member, but his dynamic with everybody else and everything he brought to it, which wasn't necessarily on the page, he became one of the main stars of the show because he was so much fun to play with. So we have a Doctor. He runs around. He causes trouble. Who reins in that trouble? Well, figure number 6487, Lieutenant Tuvok, who is our Vulcan head of security on the ship. Let's have him come in before we talk about him.
There he is.
And there is Tuvok, played, of course, by Tim Russ, who is an actor who made several appearances in Star Trek before he was cast as a main cast member. He was actually in the running for Geordi way back in the day. He made several appearances on Next Generation, and he was even in, I believe, Star Trek 6 before being cast as Tuvok. And ironically, they have a crossover episode where they go back to that timeline, and Tuvok, because he's a Vulcan, lives for a long time, is actually back there in a similar character that he played, but not the same character as Tuvok himself. What do you think, sir? I
feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, there haven't been a lot of recurring Vulcan characters outside of Spock. This was sort of this is a big deal.
Yeah, this is the first Vulcan main cast member since Spock, yeah.
And it looks like pretty cool. I'm liking the likeness. There's definitely cool detail in the painting of the eyebrows, the ears, of course. I'm digging him. He looks pretty badass, although I imagine he's much more even-tempered.
Yes, well, he's interesting as a security officer because he's very protocol and rules and he's not very fiery. It doesn't mean he's not badass, but he's more of the rigid military detective sort. But we actually find him on the Maquis ship, but the Maquis don't know that he's actually a spy sent by the Federation. So in the pilot, we have him do sort of the switcheroo, aha, I was here all along, and I'm Starfleet. So we which is interesting because on the Next Generation, as a separate character, he plays a criminal who tries to capture the Enterprise.
Oh, that's cool.
So he's got range. And speaking of range, he's also a musician. He's got a band today that he plays out. He's great. So yeah, that's Tuvok.
Love him. I'd add him to my collection.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I have good news. We have now, for you, run out of figures in Starfleet uniforms.
Yes.
Look out. We have our first passenger aboard Voyager. Let's take a look at 6488 Kess. Here we are. Come on in, Kess. So, interestingly, on the box of this, she's listed as the Ocampa Kess. And the Ocampa is the name of her species, but not Kess. It's weird. It'd be weird for Star Trek fans. So Kess is an Ocampan who we meet in the pilot. She's the first person on the ship that is actually from the Delta Quadrant. And we meet her in the pilot, and she hops on board. The character is played by Jennifer Lien. And what's interesting about her species is that her race only lives for 7 years.
Huh.
That is the normal lifespan of her species. So she shows up on the series as a 2-year-old, but is a full-grown person, but it certainly adds a layer of interest to a character if your lifespan is only 7 years compared to everybody else.
But they're like totally humanoid, other than the
humanoid. They've got little weird ears, and we will find out in the show that their reproductive system is weird and different.
Okay.
But other than that, pretty much humanoid. She was the other thing that's interesting about their species is they have weird latent psychic powers. That she's telepathic, and then eventually she sort of turns into Carrie.
Oh, really?
And she can do telekinesis. She can bend stuff. She ends up being super powerful. But that is how they write her off the show after season 3. To be replaced by someone you might have mentioned.
Interesting skirt. Interesting kind of costume design there.
Yeah. So like what is that? A shift dress? I don't know.
Interesting. One of the first characters we've seen that isn't an alien with normal shoes, with like a female boot kind of situation.
Right. No, totally normal shoes. And they did a pretty good approximation of the outfit she wore in the pilot, which is you see the picture there. She was one of those characters that had different outfits every episode. So she didn't have a standard uniform because she was a civilian. So that's Cass. And she was, in the story, dating our next friend, and that is figure 3489. Who is it? It's Neelix. Let's beam in, sir.
Hell yeah.
So, this is Neelix the Talaxian, and similar to Cass, it's like the Talaxian Neelix. Even though Neelix is a major character over all 7 seasons of it. And played by Ethan Phillips, also a Broadway guy. I saw him in David Mamet's November. And this character, he's sort of a Talaxian. He's a junk trader / Muppet sort of thing is how I would describe him. And he's definitely the comedic relief sort of on the ship. And Ethan Phillips is such a bold and funny actor. And he joins up with them after rescuing his girlfriend Kess, and is there as somebody who was born in the Delta Quadrant and helps basically be the ambassador and let them know what's going on with all these species and the histories and what's going on. He's a character that some find annoying, and he ends up as the chef slash morale officer. But he actually comes with a really dark past, the character does. So there's a lot of range in the storytelling with our good friend Neelix. And of course, he has to deal with his girlfriend leaving.
Because she's only got 7 years to give him.
That's right. So, it's interesting. What do you think about the figure here?
I think the figure's really cool. The design's super rad. Costuming is cool. Painting is totally different than anything we've seen. Reminds me a little bit of the Bebop or Rocksteady maybe in the Turtles line. I'd be interested to see if that hair matches up, if I recall from my childhood. But yeah, I don't know much about the character, so I can't tell if that whimsy translates. But
it doesn't really translate to the figure. The figure itself, I think they did a bit of a rewrite on the character. Like in the pilot, he was quirky and silly, but he was a little bit tougher, a little bit more badass in the pilot than he ended up being later in the show. So perhaps when they designed the figure, the whimsy wasn't quite there.
Right.
And I gotta say, like, the facial features don't quite match Ethan Phillips.
Yeah, I thought that was sort of like a beard kind of scenario going on the figure, but no, it looks like a...
Yeah, he's got little chops, which the figure does have, but the spots are less prominent on Neelix, and there's much more of like a shaded color feature on the side of his head than ended up on the figure, which makes me wonder if as we've talked about before, the figures have to get designed very early,
right,
in the situation, and maybe this is a prototype of the design that got massaged a little bit as time went on. Similarly, this ridiculous checkered outfit is one of many ridiculous outfits that he wears throughout the series. This was also not a uniform for Neelix.
All right, well, I'm sad to say, but I guess it's time to bring it home. What do you got bringing up the rear?
Well, what I have is a surprise. I told you weren't going to get our new character, but I just couldn't not complete the cast of Voyager. Of course, we have to do 7 of 9. Let's do 6, 5, 2, 2, 7, 7 of 9. Let's beam her in. Okay, yeah. So this is the... I
guess that's not me.
Guess that's not you. That's just a black screen.
Yeah. What I wanted you to see was this face.
Yep, that's the face that everybody made when they introduced... Just gonna beam back in. Well, folks, we all know what's going on here. This is the character of 7 of 9, played by Jeri Ryan, who was a human assimilated by the Borg back in the Alpha Quadrant, taken back to the other side of the galaxy as a child, became a full Borg, and then she was rescued by our heroes from the Borg, and then joined the cast of Voyager. And certainly the intent of the producers here is obvious. I don't think it necessarily needs to be extrapolated on, other than the fact that her uniforms were so tight. She was, I think, pretty much like vacuum sealed into them. And it doesn't age well. The sort of obvious sexualization of this character. And of course it was, Jeri Ryan is a terrific actress. And the character is fascinating because she comes in basically as a Borg and has to reclaim and relearn her identity as a human. And she was never a human as an adult. So all she knows of being a human is when she was a child, and so she has there's so much to mine there about the exploration of this complex and interesting character. But clearly, there was a fixation on certain things. It did, however, rescue the series because the ratings were not so good. And when she joined the show, hey, look at that. Ratings are fine.
I find it interesting that, well, not interesting. I guess if when looking through the lens that you just kind of walked through, I was going to say I found it interesting that someone who's coming out from being part of the Borg, you'd think you'd get more design, like more of a facial sort of mashup of the two things. But I guess they wanted to keep her as possible.
Yes, that was very much the intent. There is a figure coming up later that is her half Borg.
Okay.
Which is pretty cool. We'll get to it. But while we're talking about the figure, let's talk about this specific figure. 7 of 9 is a very hard to get figure, and there was 3 of them created, 4 of them, counting the half Borg, and this particular figure was a Toy Fair exclusive, meaning you could not buy this in the stores. It was a special product. There's a Toy Fair magazine. It was back in the old school. You had to cut out a little card and mail it in and get this figure. And there were, it's hard to tell with the numbers here, but it is understood that there's only 10,000 of these. And it was from Toy Fair issue 29. And if we hop over to Toy Cam, I actually have the packaging it came in because it was never done in on a display shelf. So they mailed it just very simply in this little box. All the Toy Fair exclusives came in boxes this size. Some of them were much simpler, but inside the box, it was very simple. She had her stand, which I've now just thrown on the ground. I'll grab another stand. You get the idea. Came with a stand, and she came with a little Borg choking hazard. But that's it. It's really quite simple. The fun here is if you look at the bottom, it literally says choking hazard. So we're we're not kidding. But this is the box that the 7 of 9 Toy Fair exclusives are on. This one it's not super difficult to get, but you definitely are not going to get it, for the cheap price you get most of the rest of them. So that's 7 of 9.
Cool.
Any more thoughts on our new friend?
I'm actually, and I know this is going to lead you to just tell me to watch it, I'm really interested in that lore because I wasn't aware that you could come back after you were assimilated to the Borg, like that you could come out of that. Was that the first time that's been explored in the show's lore?
Well, sort of. You could say on a technicality, in the Best of Both Worlds Part 2, Picard, of course, was turned into Locutus as a Borg, and they were able to get him back. But you could say he was only a Borg for about a week, as opposed to dozens of years. So it's a little murky at various points. Sometimes to justify killing somebody, they say, "Oh, he can't come back." But on Voyager, we explore people being able to come back a fair amount, and that really was the secret sauce of the second half of Voyager. Because they were sort of like lost, not quite knowing who the bad guy. They had a couple of series of bad guys who just were very unsatisfying and didn't feel cool or scary. They felt a little silly. But once the Borg came in, it was like, oh shit, the Borg, and it opened up a whole mess of storytelling. And you lost a little bit from Next Gen by doing that, because part of what made the Borg so scary was we didn't know what the deal was. We didn't understand them. It just felt like this horrible, unstoppable force. And so knowing what makes them tick and their vulnerabilities makes them a little bit less scary. It's sort of like the Aliens series, where in the first 2 Aliens, you're just like, I have no idea what's going on here. And that's why I didn't like the Prometheus movies, because they explained too much and made them less scary. However, on Voyager with the Borg, I think personally, what we lost in the just sort of like they're scary and invincible and unstoppable, we gained in a lot of interesting, complex storytelling about repatriating people who have gone through this experience. You know, Seven deals with all of the guilt of having participated in, the Borg ran around assimilating people, but they basically just genocide everywhere they went. They wiped entire civilizations and planets off the map. And so she had to deal with a lot of the emotional repercussions of having done that. So I thought it was I loved adding them to the series. I think it rescued the series creatively as well as ratings-wise. Yeah. So that's a very long answer to your short question.
No, it's great. I was into it. Super into it. But let's tell people how they can assimilate with us, and then we'll send them along their way, and we'll join up again next week. What do you have in store next week, by the way, Keith?
Ooh, well, next week, first off, I think we're going to do a couple of unboxings,
right? Yeah,
which should be really fun. In fact, little tease here. In this box is the silver 7 of 9. Kind of hard. It didn't come cheap, but it's in this box. I haven't even opened it. I'm going to do it just for you, so I'm going to do that. And then I also got a big lot of more contemporary ones. I might have gotten the Beverly Crusher in the DS9 uniform. Hard to get. So we will talk about that. And I think I'm going to do an episode. I haven't fully decided, but certainly coming up at some point, we're going to do an episode called Alien Incognito, which are figures of our main characters, pretending to be another species to go undercover.
This is what I need to see. I need to see that.
Yeah, so that's coming up. You know what? If you have ideas of what we should do, because I like to mix it up and keep it interesting and have themes, you can email us about the themes at my look at my Star Trek Toys at gmail.com, or leave a comment below. We love interacting with you. We're going to do an episode with all of your comments and questions. Also do us a big favor, like and subscribe. It really helps us find new people to talk with and interact with, which is so much fun. I'm having such a good time doing this show, and I hope you enjoy it as well. Mike, it's always fun to play with toys with you.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that we could be 40-year-old men that do just that. But until next time, Keith, this has been...
Look at my Star Trek toys!